the president blamed jet lag for his debate performance, but he was back stateside for well over a week. So does he really need more than a week and a half to recover from traveling in Europe? And is that really what he thinks caused his point?
So, yeah, just a couple of things, and I do appreciate the question because the president has certainly spoken to this many times about the debate, and so he had an opportunity to do that in front of supporters, and as you just stated, he did that. He owned that the debate was not his best night, and he said himself, it's not an excuse, but it's an explanation. I was standing here yesterday, and many people were asking why and what's the explanation, and that's what you heard from him. Look, the two, I think, in addition to the two major trips, he was also continued to do his presidential duties. He worked late in doing that, and he also prepared for the debate. And on top of that, there was obviously the jet lag, as you just asked about, and also he had a cold. And you all heard directly, you heard from him during the debate. He had a hoarse voice. Many of you reached out to me and my team and some other members of the White House asking what was going on. We confirmed that he had a cold. And so I think those two things, continuing obviously to do his duties as commander-in-chief, as the president.
Karine Jean-Pierre, desperately trying to save the president in the 11th hour here as word circulates that indeed it looks like he's going to have to step down. He's talking to allies about stepping down, and yet Karine Jean-Pierre is coming up with the cold. He had a cold. He had jet lag. Okay, you keep those coming, KJP. We understand you get a tough job, but this has just been reported. Welcome to the show, by the way. Subscribe if you haven't. I'm Trish Regan. It's the Trish Regan Show. I want you to take a look at what the New York Times is saying right now. Ladies and gentlemen, the handwriting is on the wall. You have only to look at all the polls, and you know what? These are competitive people. You know, the people that are running the Democrat Party, they don't like to lose. I think we know that. They do not want to lose. And right now, if you look at all the polls, they're suggesting that indeed they're going to lose, and they're going to lose big if Joe Biden stays in the job. So now it's being reported by the New York Times that he's talking to allies about how he's going to exit. Biden allegedly told an ally he's weighing his options. Well, that's like political suicide, right? Because now that headline hits the tape. You see it right there in the New York Times, and it's all they're talking about on the networks right now, about how he just spoke to an ally about possibly leaving the race. And look, the polls back up that idea. You have only to look at each one of them. I mean, the New York Times, Siena poll just coming out, showing that he's way behind. And so consequently, you know, they smell blood. They smell blood in the water. These are a bunch of sharks and a bunch of vultures. And like I said, they don't like to lose. And don't forget who's running the show. Thank you very much. That would be Barack Obama. I mean, all his cronies, right? They just came right over from the old administration. They're part of this one, and they're looking at the handwriting on the wall, and they're saying to themselves, there's no way in HELL that we're going to be able to make it until November. There's no way we're going to be able to win. And they don't have, March 2020 up their sleeve or anything like that. So a new poll from the New York Times and Siena College shows Donald Trump has widened his advantage in the race. The poll shows Mr. Trump ahead of Mr. Biden, according to the New York Times, among likely voters, 49% to 43%. That's his largest lead of the race so far in anything that the Times Siena poll has shown. And bottom line, you can go over to the Wall Street Journal poll just out today. Bottom line is that people are really trepidatious about his age. He's 81 years old. And by the way, nothing wrong with being 81. You know what? Trump's only like 3 years younger than him, and yet he looked 30 years younger up on stage. He seemed full of vitality. He seemed like he might even be Biden's son up there on stage. And so it really, if anything, just proved that age is really just a number. But here's the deal. If you start to lose your faculties, which is what is being alleged about Joe Biden, then you really can't be in that job. I don't care if you're 61 or you're 81 or if you're 51. You know what? If it starts to go, it's really going. And this is what is being reflected in every single poll that you see. NBC having to admit it right here.
Meanwhile, more signs of trouble in the polls. A post-debate New York Times Siena poll has President Biden's support eroding, with former President Trump holding a 9-point lead among registered voters. It's the first post-debate poll to show a gap outside the margin of error. That number tightened slightly to 6 points among likely voters, pushing it back within the margin of error, but just barely. And yet another poll out this afternoon from the Wall Street Journal shows a 6-point gap between Trump and Biden among registered voters, the widest lead for Trump in that poll since 2021. And we should note, 2 other surveys released this week show a much smaller margin, with Mr. Biden tied or slightly trailing Mr. Trump within the margin of error.
But you see how the momentum's growing? In other words, maybe the initial polls showed some trepidation. I mean, a lot of people that are diehard Biden fans, they're not going to change their mind no matter what. And a lot of them didn't even bother watching the debate. I know some people like that, by the way. Some real liberals that weren't going to change their minds no matter what. But this is a play for people in the middle. And the people in the middle saw that and said, whoa, I don't think this guy can even do the job. And by the way, that's a whole other discussion that we need to have, because if he steps down because he's not capable, then what the heck is he doing as president of the United States right about now? I'd like to know.